Want to say thank you to everybody for joining us again this week. We have a great crew. Start typing those questions into your questions window. Dave will be monitoring that. I have a quick demonstration, about 10-15 minutes, to show you something, demonstrate really low code. But we want to get your questions because that helps us drive the success of this here. My name is Dean McCormick. Again, as Dave said, this is being recorded, so let's try to keep the language kind of clean and no yelling or stuff like that. We appreciate it. But I really enjoy everybody attending it each week, and I enjoy these sessions, and I just want to say thank you very much. There's just so many amazing, cool things that are being built with Alpha Anywhere, and it's coming across, and just so, I mean, every week I'm hearing of new projects, new capabilities, new deployments, and it's very, very exciting with that. So one thing I wanted to kind of talk to people about is I wanted to show a demonstration today, and I wanted to show how low code can win the day, meaning that within about 5 minutes I can build a signature capture system. So think of this as maybe a system out in the field where your agents or your users are out there and they need to be able to collect data. And then one of the most important things these days is verification, using, say, signature capture to be able to capture that data or just capture who actually signed for it. A great example is, I mean, if you receive a UPS or FedEx, you notice now that there's no waybills. They hand you a mobile platform and you write or sign your name on there. Well, wouldn't that be awesome to add to your applications for specific things where you need some kind of signature capture confirmation? So I'm going to show you how to build that in a matter of a few minutes, and then what we're going to do is, again, go into our questions. Great, we got some questions coming in. Please keep those coming in. We'll get to them right after this. Real quick, Dave, just want to do a process check. Visually coming through, seeing everything, looking good?
Yep, all set.
Okay. Great. So I'm going to go over into my development system, and I've got my development system running here. For people that are new to Alpha, bear with us. I'll try to make sure we cover everything there. But we're in the Web Projects Control Panel, and this is where you create the different controls components to build your application. So let me go ahead and show you what it looks like in operation. So I've created what's called a signature capture, and I'm going to go ahead and show you a working preview of what we're going to build. So, and actually I'm going to make this an iPad just to make it a little easier to see there. So you'll notice that I have a signature capture situation. So I have a form. This is a mobile form. You'll notice that I could show it in iPad for horizontal, vertical. I could actually do it in Nexus, etc. This is our built-in simulator in the system that shows you how these things work. And what I want to be able to do is I want to say, okay, this is Joe Smith, and I'm going to capture Joe Smith's information. So I'm going to create a new record. I'm going to put in Joe Smith, and then I'm going to go in my great thing is there and accept that and sign it, and then I've got Joe's information in there. Voila! I now have captured Joe's information. This information has been submitted up to the database. Now, granted, this is a little crude. You'd want to clean it up, make it look a lot better. But you can see I have a history of different ones that are in here. So if I want to create a new one, I can say it's John Doe, and I'm going to go ahead and, oops, let's clear that. Actually, we'll sign this. We'll go John, accept. We'll submit that in there. Now you'll notice I've got Joe Smith and John Doe. This has been recorded. It's actually captured as an image and submitted up to the database. Very cool. And I'm using some out-of-the-box capability here. But I want to show you how this literally took me 5 minutes to build. And I want to walk you through it just to give you a feel for it. And what's great is you can include this signature capture on any kind of form. So if you have an existing UX, you can add a new panel, add it there, do a whole bunch of different things. Very easy to use. So let's go ahead and go in here. So the first thing I wanted to let you know is I already have a data table. So I'm going to go into my Web Projects Control Panel, and I have a tool in here called the Database Explorer. So I've already made a SQL Alpha DAO connection strings. And for you people who are experienced, please bear with me as I go through this, but we have a lot of newbies and we want to make sure, and by the way, newbie is a term of endearment. So I already have my Alpha DAO connection string. So I'm going to click on my database there. So I can look at my connection string and I can actually see my different tables. And so I can then look in here. So you'll see on there, and I'm going to refresh this, So I've got my tables in here, and you'll notice I have a table I've created called signatures. So this is built into the system if you need to look at your database real quick. We have a ID field, which is a primary key auto increment. I have the name, and then signature, which in this case, since it's Access, is binary. But for instance, in MySQL or SQL Server, be like long text, something like that, because you're going to be storing a binary image in the database. So I've already created my table called signatures in my database, so I'm good to go and ready to go there. So now let's go ahead and we're going to create my form to do that. So I'm going to click New. I'm going to create a new component. You'll notice that I have a web component, A5 different. I'm going to click Web Component. I'm going to click Next. And you'll notice I have a whole bunch of pre-built ones, things like mapping, video player, image gallery, etc. But in my case, I want to do grid. Oh, I'm sorry, not grid. Bear with me. UX. Sorry here. I want a web component and I want a UX. Okay, so I could pick one of my out-of-the-box defaults. We ship with a whole bunch of different defaults, but I'm just going to click OK and create a blank one. Okay, so on the left now, we have our different things we can add to our form. On the right, we have the properties here. So let's make this simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this to the database. So I could go into data binding, pick the table, and do all that stuff, but I want to actually accelerate this process. So I'm going to go down to text box, click text box, and you'll notice when it opens up, I've got two modes. Yours may look like this, where you're creating a single control. But in my case, I want create multiple new controls at once. Now I could type in my fields, but actually Alpha does something much easier for me. You'll see we have a thing down here called populate list from a table. So I'm going to click on that. Okay, I'm going to connect to my database. So it's asking me, how do I want to connect? So I'm going to select connection. Notice I have multiple database connections, but I want to use connection. That's where my table is at. Then it's going to ask me what table name. I click on the table name, and I'm clicking on signatures. Notice I could also connect on a view, but in this case, I'm connecting directly to the table signatures. Okay? Now I want all my fields, and I want it to include the data binding information. So I could have bound it to the table, added the forms one by one, or I could just simply click OK and go. So it puts in my different fields, and then I click OK, and now it's building this for me. So you'll notice here, it's already added in those fields here. So what I want to do next is the following. I'm going to come back to the signature part. Notice that it's included a field as a text box, my name as a text box, and my signature is actually an image. And I'm going to come back and change that in a minute. But I'm going to add a few other controls to this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to add some navigation controls. So I'm going to go down here to define controls, and I'm going to add a few controls. So the first one I'm going to add is record navigation. Our first thing I want to do is a submit and reset. So you'll notice that I've added a submit button. So now when I run this, and I could look at this right now, nothing really exciting, but you'll see my fields and my submit and reset button. But let me go back into my design. So that's when I want to submit the data in there. So next thing I want to do is I'm going to add a new record button. It's a pre-made button that automatically sets up the system to do that. And then I want to put in here some record navigation buttons. And think of these as my first, previous, last, kind of at the end of it. And so you see it's starting to come together. I have my fields up here, I have my sit, then I have my new record, first, last, etc. Now, so because it's data-driven, I need to know how to do that. Now, I have to do two other key things, and I'll explain that really quickly. So basically, I have the structure of my form. I have my form fields, my submit button, which will actually submit it back to the server to save it. I have my new record, which will initialize the form to create a new record, and I have my first, next, last, etc. So we need to do two things, and basically this is kind of, think of it as you're wiring up the plumbing. We've set the fields on there, but we need to wire up the plumbing. And we need to do two things. When this form loads, we need to set it the primary key, sort of connect it into the database. And then secondly, we need to also, when we save or submit this, we need to save the data to the database table. So those are two kind of little things we need to do. So after you have your fields set up, and you'll notice all the data binding has been set up. If I actually click on this field right here and scroll down to my properties area, you'll notice that it's already set up my data binding to my table, into the particular field. So it already has mapped what these fields should be referring to in the database for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my server-side events. And for people who are new, these are events that get fired when this UX opens up, either on a web page or out in the field on a mobile component. And the two ones that are most important is on dialog initialize. That fires when the first thing initializes itself. And then the after dialog validate, which is when I click that submit button, it fires that. So in our on dialog initialize, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add in my little piece of code called load primary keys for parent table. And what this basically does is those other controls like the first, last, next, new record, they need to know what primary keys are set up. And so by doing this and adding this little piece of code in there and just accept the defaults right there, boom, it now knows and has read the database and understands what's going on. So otherwise it really wouldn't talk to the data. So this is like a, think of it as like a beginning trigger function there. Now the other thing I need to do is when I submit this form, when I click the submit button, it's going to submit it back to the server for me, and I need to do a what's called an after dialog validate. And so this occurs after I click that submit. So again, I'm going to go into this function. I'm going to go to my action scripting button because these are already pre-made actions. So I'm going to click action scripting, and you'll notice the first one is save submitted data to tables. So it's already pre-created. I click OK. It creates a name for it, and now it brings up a Genie, and I have a huge amount of control. After I can do that, I can show messages, I can run some client-side events, I could run server-side events. I mean, it's pretty amazing. But in my case, all I want to do is adjust this to say edit record just submitted. So I click OK. Now what's going to happen is when this thing loads, the first thing it's going to do is run the on dialog initialize. It's going to run this little action that's kind of going to wire everything up to the database and look at the existing state of the database and look at it. And then after I click that submit button, it's going to execute this server-side action to save the database into the table. So I want to do one other thing here. You'll notice that when I look at the working preview now, you'll notice, voila, it's actually loaded up the field information. And that when I did my server-side on dialog initialize, this little code automatically connects to the database, loads up all the primary keys, and refreshes the interface. So now when I load here, I have this, and I can click Next, and you'll notice it's walking through them. So I didn't have to write any code to talk to the database. The system did that for me. And all these things here are first, last, next record, etc. Now, let's go back into the design. You'll notice that there's one thing that is obviously missing, is that the signature is not showing up correctly. So what we're going to do is go back into design. We're going to go into my controls, and we're going to click on the signature. And notice that it's showing it as an image. But what I want to do is I want that to actually be my signature capture control. So I'm going to click over here to control type and change it from image to signature capture. So now what that does is that relates the signature capture control to that data field. And watch, when I click there, I go ahead, I'm going to save this now. I'm going to go sig capture, and I'll change that since we have our other one, demo. Okay, I go into working preview. You'll notice that, voila, instead of that simple little binary image that wasn't showing up correctly, it has now interpreted that information as a signature, and it's displaying it as such. So I go into each one of those pieces there and do from there. And it works. If I create new records, since we already wired it up, it creates a blank record. I top in here and I go demo time, and I'm going to go ahead and go demo time. And if that's not a serial killer's signature, you never know what it is. I can actually clear this, and I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to do it sort of West Texas style, and click accept. And then I can submit this record. So I've kind of put the information in, but I still need to click submit, and now you'll notice that it's assigned a unique ID and saved this record. So as I move forward, it is now in my database. Now if I want to see what this would look on a mobile interface, I go to design, click mobile, go back into my working preview, and now I can see what it's going to look like on the server. And again, everything basically works the same. I can do my thing, etc. Works all those things. And you'll notice too, if I go to my, like, let's say I go to this one and I click sign and I change this to something else and submit it, it's doing an update of that record. Now, obviously, you can make this so you can't update the record, is that once it's put in there, you can set a code or a field saying signature capture, do not change. So that's a lot of little things you can do, and that's the power of the system, is it gives you the hooks to say, oh, make signature, say, for instance, read only, don't change it, don't process the change, etc. But as you can see, that took about 10 minutes or so. If I hadn't been talking, maybe 5 minutes there, and now I have a mobile thing. And in fact, I could, if I wanted to, do a remote test. And for people who are new to this, when you're in working preview, if you click remote test, full preview, and display a QR code, I can take my phone, zap this QR code, and run this application right on my phone or tablet if I'm on the same network. So I have to be on the same network for this to work. So my laptop in this case would be easy to connect there. So I'm not going to do that right now, but I could literally show you how zapping this, I could start running this, and boom, I could be doing signature capture on my iPad with that piece there. And actually, you know what? Do we have 2 minutes is okay? Let me go ahead and go back in here. Let's go to, let's rebroadcast system. I'm going to go ahead and do this real quick. Wait a second. I really would love to show you guys how this works. It's so easy. There we go. There's my phone. Okay. So now I'm going to go there. You see all my private messages. Let's go to my QR code reader. We're flying without a net here. You'll notice I have my QR code reader. Now I'm going to switch over here. It'll go away, but I'm zapping that code we saw. And now I'm back, and check it out. Look at this. This is so cool. See something? And again, I have a little bit of an issue down here. It's not showing this. You can see everything is in there. So all my controls are here. I can go through the different controls. You notice it's going through the controls. I can do this, show it sideways. It's obviously not optimized, but I could go ahead in here. I could go down here. I'll go back to this vertical real quick. Okay. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to click New Record. I'm going to click Hello. Okay. Oops. I think hold on a second. Something there. There. There we go. Okay. Oh, I lost it. Oh, I'm so close. Let me see if I can do it real quick. Bear with me. Here we go. Okay. So you notice I put in hello. Now I'm putting in the signature and accepting that signature, and I'm submitting that, and now it's been submitted to the backend database. Okay, so I'm going to go, so you'll notice I go now back into here, and I go back into my working preview, and I'll go next. Boom, that's the one I did on my phone, but now it's showing up on the system here because my system wrote against my backend database there. So I hope that was entertaining. I took another few minutes there to do that, but I wanted to show you how easy and simple it is. And the important thing about that is the concept of, and let me go ahead and close this out right now. That's the concept of low code. As you can see, I literally wrote 0 lines of code. I merely pointed and clicked, and I have a full-blown signature capture system. Probably needs a little enhancements for security and other elements there. Deployable on an iPhone in 10 minutes. And if I wanted to, I could go ahead and deploy that up to a server and then send out that link, and then the team could go ahead and do that. I should have done that so people could play with that. We'll do that for a future demonstration to show you how fast and easy it is for you to do those things. But that's what I wanted to get across, was just, you know, a quick 10-minute demo. You can see you can add that to your capability, and that is what I had, Dave, for our presentation.
Very good. Well, we have lots of questions, so let's
Good.
We'll start with an easy one. Russ is asking about the signature capture control and all that. Does that work offline, or do you have to have an internet connection?
Currently it is an online component, and I will have to double check in working on offline capability. I've only done it in online, but I'll make a note and we'll research and find out if you can use it in an online capability. We do know now we can capture images offline. That capability is now in there, but I'll have to do a little research to see if we've enhanced the signature capture. That would be a natural extension of the system.
Yeah, do check on that. It was my understanding that that was the current capability, but yes, we will get back to you if that's not it. It's
okay. Great question.
Very much. Another question has to do with just someone noticed that you were using Keynote, and Alpha Anywhere is a PC-based product. So how do you do that? And
good question, and very observant. Got to be careful what's on my screen there. I use Parallels Desktop, so you can use. There's also Fusion. I like Parallels. That seems to be mine. I've just used it for a while and I'm comfortable with it. It seems to work pretty good. A couple little click. The one thing, and I'll give a warning for folks, but so it works great, and so therefore I'm actually running Windows in a virtual. So when I pop over there, I'm now in my Windows environment, and everything works out really good. And I'm working on a MacBook Pro, and because it's solid state disk, it's hideously fast. And I suggest if you do any development these days, upgrade your primary hard drive to be a solid state disk, and your life will get that much better. There's only one thing I've found that's kind of challenging, is that because the MacBook Pro has a Retina display, sometimes things kind of are a little squished, or certain things don't look exactly perfectly. Because of the high pixel density, I get some. So what I do also have my regular laptop that I can pull up to run things, so I can see it on a regular laptop versus a MacBook, just for that final verification before submitting things for review by customers, clients, and things like that. But again, I'm using. In my case, I'm using Parallels, but you could also use, I think it's called VMware Fusion or something along those lines.
I use Parallels as well on the Mac, and I know some of our developers do as well. It's a very common now for people to use Macs for development, but you do need to run Windows for both the app server and the development environment.
Yeah, but although that's things are moving along, we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think the development environment will be PC for much time because it's so rich.
It will be. We're also looking at offering virtualized versions of it, so you can just basically log in through a remote terminal connection and get it that way. So conceivably, you could be developing on a Chromebook or something like that, should you choose.
Yeah, I mean, it's really moving that direction. And then on the back end, we're still Windows Server, but the team is rapidly working on, because you can use things like Node.js and other pieces, kind of more open sourcing is moving in that direction. No stated plans at this time, but definitely under consideration.
Excellent. So here we have a couple questions having to do with lists and hierarchical lists, and I think that came up last week as well. And so I'm going to give you a question, and if it's too complicated to solve here now during this presentation, by all means, let me know, and we'll come up with a solution and share it with folks afterwards. But let's give it a shot.
Okay.
Basically, we have someone here who is doing looks like an invoicing system, and so they have the typical order header and then order details. But here's where it gets interesting. They're selling, for example, tablets, and each of these tablets has a unique serial number. So if they're invoicing, one of their lines on the invoice says, "I'm buying 10 Samsung Galaxy tablets," you need to have a table that actually has got 10 rows that can store the serial numbers for these tablets.
Okay, yeah.
And as an extra twist, it'll come in barcode form, so it'll be a scanned image. But for now, I think the list thing would be probably the first thing to tackle.
Okay, the way I would approach that is when you have when you're developing a user interface in Alpha, we can use so let me go ahead and create something real quick. I'm going to create and I'm not going to be able to demonstrate the whole thing, but let me give you the hints on how we would handle that. So you can have in my controls, let's say I am building and I'm back in my development environment and going to move a little quicker there, so bear with me. So I have my list here that's like list customers, okay? And then you can also create a second list. Let's say, actually it wouldn't be list customers, maybe it'd be called list orders. Okay, then you can create a second list order products.
Details.
Yeah, or details.
Sure.
Okay, so the idea behind the list product, and both of these can be disconnected lists, and what you can do is you can set it up so they're disconnected. So therefore, these are going to get populated on the front end or on the mobile device. So when I go in this list of orders, and let me go ahead and just really quickly, I'm going to connect this up to my database. In this case, it's going to be orders, and then and there. Okay. The important thing I want to do is go into my list properties. I'm going to say persist data local storage. Okay. So now what's going to do is when I go ahead and go into this list and show it. Oh, I've got to do a list layout real quick. Okay, and then I go into my working preview. It's going to automatically grab all that stuff and put it in this list as local data. And again, it doesn't look really pretty there. Now, I can do that also with list products. So let's say these two are not connected to each other. So I can go in and do list properties connected to a whole other table and put those there. And I'm not going to say it has a parent table. And then in list orders, you can actually do, let me go here. In list, and I'm a little rusty, but I might have to get back to you, is that, okay, so let's look at this list of orders. I can go into list orders, and I'm going into the list builder here, and I'll go to fields. And here are the fields that come back from the database. But I think I can actually do a lookup of a field from another one, and I'm going to have to probably jump back to you. But what you can do is on fields, where is that? You can actually look up data in another local table list on that form. So you're able to actually do a lookup of the information there. So I'm going to have to get back to you on the specific method, but the overall method is you have the different tables. Like that second table is another list that is a remote list, is a disconnected list, and then you can refer to that list from the list of orders. And I'll have to remember how to do that. And I apologize, everybody. I don't have it on there, but there's a way for me to connect the two of them together, kind of do a lookup in the process there. So I'll have to just follow up. If we can get the contact information, I can connect directly to them. So
yes, we'll do that. Question for you though on that. And are you limited to two tables, or can you have a list connected to a list?
No, you can have multiple tables. You can put as many of those tables. Now realize if you're deploying through PhoneGap, you have a lot of data. If you're deploying through the web browser, there are certain limitations in terms of how much total data you can kind of cache locally. So you just have to kind of be aware of that. And I'm not sure the number off the top of my head, but if you're going to deploy through PhoneGap, you have access to more local storage. But if you're in the web browser, there's certain limitations of local storage.
Right, right. For local storage, I believe it's 5 megabytes. So if you're not storing pictures, it's probably not a big deal. But you may want to.
If it's textual data, you're pretty good. But if you're loading up a million rows, you may run into a little problem there.
Sure. Yep.
But I'll find that out and get that back to you, the method for doing a lookup in another there. And since the important thing to realize is that when I click on this and I say list properties and I say persist data to local storage, depending on my filter of that field list, it's going to grab all that data from that table and store it locally. And so that's another way too. You can kind of limit how much stuff comes down by using filtering, so you can minimize the amount of stuff on the front end. But it's going to automatically, for me, bring that down, store it as JSON locally, and manage it locally, so I can update it, change it, synchronize it back, etc. and then it's going to do that for each of the different lists that are in there. Now there is another method, and there's actually a link on the website. It's on the developer there. Is that you could technically save that data as local, like a JavaScript file, and download that JavaScript. But I find using lists are easy because it does a lot of the kind of stuff for you. If it's a fairly static list, then there's ways to basically download data and save it as local storage that can be used elsewhere from that standpoint. So, but we'll find out the specific of how to look up data in another list from one list that are both local on the machine.
Excellent. So hang on a second. A couple questions here. Oh, here's a good one. This one has to do with again the signature capture component. Can this be used to draw like a simple diagram? Is one of the questions here, as opposed to
yes, it's really optimized. It's really, think of it as a is just like a little scratch pad. So the answer is yeah, you could change this from signature to drawing, and you can change the text of these things. So I can actually sit there and say, okay, by the way, this is a
bad robot.
It is, exactly. And he's angry too. Yeah. So this is just a little piece of drawing. So yes, absolutely, you could use this, and you can change the dimensions of this to capture it as a simple, easy to use drawing tool. But,
so you could make it bigger than a signature line if you wanted to.
Yes. Okay. The cool thing about the signature capture is that you have this amazing amount of functionality. You could change the colors. You could include the buttons, to toggle. You can change the size of this thing. And also there's some functionality that allows you to kind of capture after you saved it and everything else. So a lot of really capabilities, and you can actually style it using CSS to make it look even better. So
great. A couple other questions here. Here's a question back, if we could just go back to lists for a second.
Sure.
The question is, when you're in the second table that you had said there's list products, how can you get it to display the actual name of the item instead of just showing the item number? In other words, what goes into that list? What fields how do you adjust that?
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So when I build my list, the first thing I do is I talk about my data source, where it's coming from. And then you obviously tell its table in the field, and the fields can be any number of fields that are in that, whatever it happens to be. So usually there's an order ID and maybe a name or something like that. And then you can go in here and format those fields. So if you're going to display them a certain way, you can display them in different ways there, as an image, as raw data, even as an icon scenario here. So it allows you, like, let's say you had a product image, you can actually display it as an image there. And then you go to list layout. And list layout is actually showing what is going to display it. So I have my universe of fields, and I may not want to show all those fields. I may only want to show a subset of them, because the other fields are used for calculations, for behind the scenes, whatever it happens to be. Now, in this case, I'm showing it as a column or list layout. So if I click Preview List, it opens up my preview, and you'll notice it's a column or list kind of scenario. Pretty boring there. But if I wanted to get a little more fancy, I could go into my list properties. I could go down to, scroll down a little bit to, where is it? Wait. From column, there it is, to layout type. And I can say freeform. And now I can go into my list layout, and I can go ahead and use either my own homegrown HTML to present it looking a different way. Notice it's putting the number in there. We probably want to do like this so it looks even better. So we'll preview that list here. You'll see that it's got things on 2 rows. Or I could go into predefined templates, pick one of these nice predefined ones. Let's go ahead and pick this one. It asked me a couple quick questions. So I'm going to say the customer ID and then the order ID. And you'll notice it just wrote some HTML for me. And now when I look at that list, I have something that's a little prettier. Again, it's not showing the icons yet, but from that standpoint. So you have complete control over what's shown, how it's shown. You can manipulate it before it's shown. You have the ability to create dynamic templates, which allow you to put if then else statements. So if, like for instance, if the order is late, you could actually put the order ID number in red. So you have basically it renders this or pre-processes this data on the mobile side before it renders it and shows it into the user. And in fact, one thing that's really exciting is called the template tester. If you click on the template tester here, you can actually create your own templates and really do some very fancy examples. And basically all you're doing is taking the data from your data source, what's been pulled back, running it through a template and showing it to the user. And so you have a huge amount of power to do that. And you can use other factors, so you can actually have different views for different people. So if they're a manager, show it in one way. If they're an employee, show it in another. If they're a customer, show it in another. So it's a limitless to what you can do to manage and modify the user interface presentation.
Great, thank you.
I do hope that answered the question.
A couple other questions, another sort of Mac-related question, and that is a Mac actually required when you're doing PhoneGap? I know that with PhoneGap and typically for an iPhone or an iPad phone apps, you do typically need to have a Mac in order to produce the application. If I can just go ahead and field this one, because I just haven't.
Sure, go ahead. No, please do.
That you actually don't have to have a Mac. When you use Alpha Anywhere, it actually builds the file that you need for you and sends it up through the PhoneGap build service. So it's you can we sort of recommend having a Mac when you're doing iPad and iPhone development, but it isn't a strict requirement. So it's up to you.
Yeah, and the only other tricky part is when you're initially setting up your with Apple, in order to actually, deploy it, you have to you have to get a certificate from Apple, and so there's a process that you go through with Apple, and it's a little easier when you have a Mac because it was originally intended for Mac. They try to tie you into the ecosystem, but there are ways around it. So you don't need, as Dave said, are not required to have a Mac to be able to do OS X or iOS development. Not required, handled by the system for you.
Excellent. Okay, so just back now that you've still had this on the screen, the person who originally asked the question, Warren, said, "Okay, wait a minute. I don't need to show item ID or employee ID. I just want to show the name." So I guess the question is, actually, I should probably clarify this, Warren, if you're there. Is the name that you are is that from the same table, Warren, or are you pulling it from another table? And if you could just answer that, we can get an answer to that. There's another question about, in the meantime, does the signature capture work with sets? And I presume by sets we mean parent-child relationships.
Sets. That sounds like a DBF question.
That's a DBF question. So it doesn't, correct. Yep. Yeah,
and I'm not, I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I don't spend much time with DBF. More SQL stuff is my expertise. So.
All right, so David, we'll have to get you the answer to that question. Let me write that down. I presume that it can be done. So we're just I'm gonna find out right from the source. And we'll get back to you on that. Another question here. We have a lot of having to get back to people today, so we're going to be a busy week for us, but that's okay. We're here to answer questions. People, let me see if I can put something else. Oh, here's a good one. Can you place a background image behind the signature capture control?
Good question.
Presumably to annotate, or maybe just so that you can write the word signature behind it or something like that. I'm not.
Let's go ahead and look. Let's go ahead and go to this here. underclass. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm thinking you might be able to play with the CSS and use CSS possibly, but it does kind of take over the screen in there. What you may do is you could probably embed this control in a layout, a fixed layout would be maybe what. So let's say you wanted to show a form with the capture of these pieces. What you can do is you can take all these pieces here and then use a container and use what's called the absolute layout container. And there's a great demonstration video. There's a number of them on there that are available. So what you can do is with an absolute layout container, you can select a background. Now, the tricky part is that it will do a background for all these, and then you overlay where you want your signature on that form. So you would have like a PNG of the form, and then over the signature area, you would then put that signature capture tool right there. But I have not. I'd have to test that out to make sure it works. But that's one way to kind of represent signing a form. And then what's great is you can align your other fields where they actually data entry on the form, and you could have sort of a visual form put together very quickly. But again, I'd have to double check and test it just to make sure.
We are currently working on controls that are meant to annotate photos, so you'd be able to take a picture and be able to write directly over that picture. So presumably that control would let you do it.
Indeed, I think those pieces are really.
Yeah, that and the digital ink pieces. So we are working in that area. Let's see what else we have for questions. Definitely some interest here in being able to do some more drawing and stuff, grid lines and things like that, and snap to grids. I'll be working on that.
Yeah, that's going to be the next round. It's going to be a lot of fun to do that.
Okay, let me find another question here. So if someone would like to see a simple example of a list reading in a SQL record and then changing a field value in the list and just saving it back.
Oh, you're talking my game. Thank you. I like it. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let me go ahead and show you how to do that real quick. So I'm in my development system. So we're going to do the following is we're going to create a web component to do that. So I'm going to create a new component. In this case, it's a web component. I'm going to click Next. In our case, we're going to create a form because lists live inside of UXs, which are our forms. And I click Next. And I'll just click OK. Okay. So now I have my controls here. And I'm in my blank form here. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to go ahead and create a list control. And so you'll notice on the left side we have all our different types of controls that are available. So I click list. And let's say I'm going to go list customers. Okay? So in this case what I'm going to do is put in a list of customers. So now I could go through and manage this whole thing, but I'm going to let Alpha do the work for me. So I'm going to click List Control Quick Setup Genie down here in the left-hand corner. So I click that. Okay, so it's going to go through and ask me a couple questions. First is, again, where am I getting my data from? So I'm going to click Connection String, and I'm going to select it. Okay, so I pointed it to my database. Now I'm going to ask what table do I want to get the data from? So I'm going to click Table Name, and I'm going to go Customers. So I'm going to go against there. Now it's asking me, well, great, what fields do you want from the customers list? So I'm going to go ahead and select them all. And again, this is the idea where I can select them all. I don't have to show them all, but I'm going to go ahead and select them all for my purposes here. Okay? So I could set a filter if I wanted to, etc. So now I've defined what is going to be in my list, kind of where it's going to be from there. Now I'm going to go to my detail view, and I'm going to say, hey, you know what? This has essentially a detail view. Think of it as an edit pane. So I click Edit there. It asks me some more questions here. In my case, I want all fields, but I could just say, you know, I only want company name, contact name, title, etc. But I'm going to go ahead and leave it and have all fields in there. I can say whether it's read-only or viewable, and do I want to enclose it in there, etc. So basically, I can quickly set what do I want in my detail view from my list. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I could have a search part, but I'm going to go down here. One thing I'm going to say, okay, I want this be able to, this whole thing to work as a disconnected capability. So I click OK. So I've set where I'm getting my data from, what is going to be in my detail view, and that I want to use it disconnected. I click OK. Boom, boom, boom. Behind the scenes, it's creating all the fields. It's creating the list. It's created all my fields from here. It's also created a placeholder show messages, and it's created my my fields or my buttons and wired them up. So everything's wired up. So I can go into my working. Actually, you know what? Let's make this look like an iPad too, just so. Well, I'll just go in right here. So let me go ahead and so we can make the demo look a little bit more interesting. So let's click mobile. So I go in here. So let's do an iPad. Okay. It's really ugly, bear with me. So I can click an item, and you'll notice that it updates it down below here. And so as I'm selecting the list, it's already wired up the list to the detail record. And you'll notice it's all there. So I'm going to go down to list like here. So let's say it's Bergs. I'm going to go into region. I'm going to type region. And you'll notice now down here I can click save. Now, a couple of things are really important. You'll notice that since I said it's disconnected, you'll notice that it's put a little orange caret right there. So what it's done is behind the scenes, it is tracking my changes as JSON for me. And then what I do is I click synchronize. Voila, that caret has gone away, and I've read it back to my server. Now, obviously, so it does all that for me. So we just completed that in about 4 minutes. And now I can go in and I can do some fun stuff. I can go in here and say, you know what, on this list right here, I'm going to go to the layout, and all I really want to show is the company name, the contact name in there. So now I go back in, working preview, starting to look a little nicer. Now I could put this on different panels. I could do anything else there. But what's really important, and I think is the core of your answer, is that if I change this and click Save, go here to another one, save that one, go to here another one, and save that one, you'll notice that all these things are happening disconnected, and then I can click Synchronize, and it will synchronize that data back to there. Now, I could also set it so it automatically synchronizes or writes it if I'm connected. I can then tweak it, but you can see you can get your basic interface up and running using that Whistler, that Genie, and I highly recommend doing that because now you can go in and start tweaking things and adjusting them to kind of work the way you want them to work. Okay?
Excellent. I have a question here that I'm going to need clarification on, and it has to do with looking for an easy way to constrain an app or panel for any and all devices. Just want to make sure that we understand what we mean by constrain. So,
yeah,
Tom, if you've got Todd, sorry, if you asked that question, if you could clarify that a bit, that would be great. Another question has to do with actually, I've got a couple good ones here. Let me find.
We like questions.
Okay, here we go. So back to the panels. Back to the list, sorry. When we were talking again about orders and order details. So here is the question. Here's what the customer is interested in doing. They want to take a, in order details where we have the product's item ID listed. He wants to instead display the name. But the catch is that table doesn't actually contain the name. That's contained in another table,
right.
The products table. So how do you display the name of the product when all you've got is the item ID? How do you look that up and
yeah, that's let me show you here, alpha 5. And I don't know off the top, so give me 1 minute and see if I can locate it. List, look up, see if we have it on there. I know that we're capable of doing that. I was working with a client that was doing that. We're probably going to have to get back on that detailed level of a question. The answer is yes. Yes. Okay, here we go. It's called lookup columns. So let me go into here, and I'll go ahead and
if you could paste that video link in, that would be great.
Yeah, you know what? Let me go back here. I have to do it on my Mac size. Okay, so let's go. Alpha 5 or anywhere. I'm so used to Alpha 5. Okay. This is where it's at. I should have looked this up ahead of time. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. Copy. Chat. Okay. So they have a video to show you how to do it, but it allows you to define what are called lookup columns, is looked up either by a JavaScript or looking up the value in another list, which I think is exactly what you're looking for. And since this will work if you're disconnected, both lists have the information local, then you should be golden. So go to that link I just sent, go down to lookup columns, watch that video, and that should hopefully address the question. Keep my fingers crossed.
Excellent. Let me see. Here's a question. Is disconnected local storage encrypted?
If you're using the web browser, the answer is no. I wouldn't trust that. I think there's methods to do it, but really, if you're in PhoneGap, the answer is yes. In PhoneGap, you have facilities to encrypt your data.
Okay, great. Find another one. Lots of questions today. This is terrific.
That's great. We appreciate it. Thank you, guys. And I apologize, and gals, excuse me, not to be sexist. I do apologize that I don't have all of the answers right off the top of my head, but we'll get there. We're learning and relearning all the time.
We had a question here about the software as a service framework, which I think I answered privately offline, but basically they were wondering, what it is and how it works and whether or not it would give them a head start to building their own SaaS application. And I think, yes, it will give you a head start, but we do in fact have a webinar on that, and you can find that at alphasoftware.com/events. In fact, that's a good page to go to if you want to take a look. Some of the webinars that we've done today, like these weekly webinars, will be found on that page, as well as a lot of other special webinars and things that have come from, and conference sessions from our last users conference can also be found there as well. So that's at alphasoftware.com/events. The other thing to do, because a couple of people have been asking about finding old and archived versions of these sessions, if you're interested in finding them, I would say the best place to go is videos.alphasoftware.com. And actually, Dion, would you mind going there?
I would love to go there.
Excellent.
Videos.alpha. See where it is? It's already on my fast list because I go there a lot.
All right. And if you scroll down to the blue button at the bottom, which says
hit the blue pill.
Hit the blue pill. Go to the documentation library. That's it. That's a little alpha application we've written, so go ahead and click on that. And just type in the word webinar. So we're missing a few, and we should have those gaps filled in the next, I would say probably in the next 3 or 4 days. We'll get the ones that we're missing. So if you go up and just type webinar into the search box and hit search.
What am I, your keyboard monkey?
You
What's
are.
going on here?
I know, exactly. I guess I could have taken control and typed it in myself, but if you don't mind, just go ahead and searching that. I actually clicked this. There we go. We have some of the weekly webinars. We will have all of them up there, though, quite soon. So you can check back there. Just do a search for webinar, and that's how you find it. Of course, you can always send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com, and I can send them out to you as well. We have another couple of good questions. So when you're building an application that's going to run both on a mobile tablet and on the web, so basically big screen and slightly smaller screen.
Yes.
How do you code your application so it knows the device and it either takes you to the correct UX or resizes?
Okay. Good question. And I'm going to send you a link to this so you can watch the video. I'll do that next few moments. But in the development environment, there's a really powerful component called App Launcher. That's the magic. So reality is most likely for a tablet and a web browser, you're going to, like a desktop, you're going to have two different UXs because you have so much more screen real estate. You can do different things. You're somewhat limited on there. For a mobile tablet and a phone, you may have one UX that kind of has a capability between them. Your app launcher is your magic. It can detect the platform you're on and tell you to go to a certain UX. It can also tell you to apply a certain CSS, so it can detect like, oh, it's iOS, go to put the CSS for iOS. If it's Android, show it in Android. So your app launcher is the way to go, and there's a great video on this. Actually, let me see if you go to there and go to app launcher. Oops, might be able to spell it right. Okay. We'll go. I don't know. Oh, there in
one word or two.
I think it's one word, but where app launcher. Okay. Just search Alpha Anywhere App Launcher, and it will walk you through how this works. And once you've gone through that, it's very straightforward. You'll be able to easily do. So my method, if I'm doing a desktop, I'll have a sort of a UX that's focused on the desktop because I have so much space. And then I'll have a UX that's focused more on the mobile platform. And then I use the app launcher to say, oh, if they're logging on here, go to here. If they're logging on with that device, go to here. So
that's great. Let me see. I think we have time for one more question. Let me see if I can find one here. That one. Just a quick question about how primary keys are handled when you are when you're entering a new record, and is that automatically set or loaded when you initiate the form, or how do primary keys work in general, basically, when a new record is created?
I'm sorry, run that by me again. It clicked out halfway through, and I lost the train. So I apologize.
How is a primary field is automatically set to auto increment when it's loaded? So how do you do that when it's time to create new records?
Right. The cool thing about Alpha is that when you let me go to my signature capture. When I go to data binding, and so I'm on my UX control here, and I've got this field right here. I would hide that field, so I would not show that to the user because they're never going to edit that information. What happens is when you go to data binding and you go bind the controls, when you specify the table, the system will automatically detect if you've set up a primary key what that field is, and also if it's auto increment. If you haven't, you can set that information yourself. But now that this information has been known to the signatures, when it's working with the fields, it knows how to interact. So when it creates the calls back to the database to insert edit data, what it will do is it will automatically know it's an auto increment and not try and set that field. So it handles it automatically, and the way that's done is when you data bind the control to the backend database, it tells which is the primary key, and that primary key is auto increment, it then handles everything for you.
Excellent. So that looks like all the time that we have for today. I want to thank Dion for presenting. I'd like to thank everyone who attended and asked questions. Some of you, you're going to get an email back from us. Actually, it would be helpful if you do send us in your email addresses. We can look them up, and your questions. But questions around the signature capture control, for example, whether or not it works offline, whether or not you could put images behind it, and some of the other questions that were asked today, we will get back to you with answers to those. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Dion.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody joining us. We look forward to seeing you in future ones, and great questions. Really appreciate it.
Take care and have a great day.